Thank you. So we begin this conversation today with gratitude, with also the acknowledgement of how important it is that we are here in this planet, alive, breathing. First thing I started to do yesterday when I was given this task to talk about simplicity this morning was to look at the definition of simplicity. So the A definition of simplicity, because there's not only one, as Ramel just reminded us, is the quality or condition of being easy to understand or do. Design can be interpreted as the art of simplicity. Good design also always carries or often carries an element of simplicity. And we'll see some examples. This is one. I spent like 4 hours on Google last night preparing this presentation. But it's a simple interface if you think about it. Now the complexity behind it is another thing. And one message that's very clear to me, having been thinking about simplicity over the past almost 24 hours, is that we need to navigate complexity in order to arrive at simplicity. So some of you have seen me use this slide before and say these exact same things, but we need to put these conversations in context. We need to remember that we live in this tiny planet floating in the middle of space, and that it's a miracle that we're here breathing. So let's begin there. A very simple idea, right? So my journey, I took Ramel's invitation to think about simplicity and using simplicity in design as an excuse to look into my own journey, and then I just got into this song and I ended up with 100 slides that I hope we get to very quickly. So I was born in Paris in 1971, and I realized yesterday I literally put, thank you, I googled Paris 1971, and I discovered something that I didn't know 24 hours ago, which is that this Polish photographer, and I wrote down his last name because I didn't know about him until last night, Eustaki Kosakowski, had this very simple idea of running through the outskirts of Paris, through the borders of Paris. The collection or the collection of photographs is called 6 meters before Paris, because he stood 6 meters from each of the signs that welcome you to Paris. So this is one of those 157 photographs that have been taken. Evidently, I googled the book and I bought it, and should I buy it soon? Because I felt it was kind of symbolic. Now, when I was born, Mexico had just hosted its Olympic Games in 1968. And again, I took this opportunity to find logos and design and simplicity that were there when I arrived on this planet. So the logo of Mexico 1968 has had a lot of impact. Lance Wyman is the author. He's an American designer. He's fantastic. He's still alive. And his work has resonated and still resonates in Mexico and around the world. He not only did the Mexico 68 logo, but he did all of these logos for, this is Lance Wyman, for the different events. And then there's this other guy. I'm going to start posting like that in our pictures now. Simplicity, we all have a phone that if it's not an iPhone, there's some technology there that came from that idea of simplicity. Mexico 68, this stadium was built in Mexico City in 1968. This is the Olympic Stadium in Ciudad Universitaria at UNAM. I didn't know it then, but I ended up going to the stadium hundreds of times, like every other Sunday. My wife Mariana, who's here, and I would go there, and it has to do with our own story of how we ended up together. And this is Lance Wyman's design on the floor of the stadium. I didn't know about this until yesterday. That stadium, this is another logo that has been very present in my life. The university and this team, and if you see the logo, it's Los Pumas de la UNAM. So it's a mountain lion, but also you see the cup, the championship cup, that makes the eyes and the nose. So again, these very simple designs that carry a lot of weight and that remain relevant throughout the years. Mexico then hosted a World Cup in 1970. And you can see Lance Wyman was also, and he had just had success with the Olympics, so they hired him. He took the same kind of model from the other logo. Pelé, I mean, right now we know about Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, but Pelé was crowned champion of the world at the Azteca Stadium in 1970. And there's also design. Design is everywhere. Design touches every aspect of our lives. This is the simplest soccer ball design and one of the most beautiful ever. Then somehow, human beings have this, we have this tendency to start complicating things. And you see some of that as we go along. But sometimes it's very simple designs and communicate better. Simplicity communicates better. This is the Azteca Stadium, which was built a few years earlier. That's where Pelé's photograph was taken. And outside Azteca Stadium, there's a sculpture by Alexander Calder called the Red Sun. A lot of people in Mexico City that have been to the stadium millions of times don't even know that it's there, or just see it and don't realize the history and the power of it. Sometimes we overlook things, which is another message that I got from kind of looking at this journey. When I was growing up in Mexico City, these were the taxis that were all around in Mexico City. They have since disappeared. But the design of this car, of the VW Beetle, and this bright yellow, white roof design is to me a classic. I used to own a little car when I was in kindergarten, and I have this trauma still, because I was playing up in this structure that kids playing, and I dropped it and I saw it on the ground, and one of my friends picked it up, saw me, and then took off. And then I went and said, hey, where's my car? What car? I never recovered this little car, so this picture makes me want to cry. Staying in transportation, this is the Mexico City Metro that was also opened in the 70s. And this is the design of the metro, the end and the lines. This is also Lance Wyman. In Mexico, unless you do a little bit of research, we don't know how important Lance Wyman has been in our lives. These are all the metro stations, and each one of these logos has to do with a particular context of where they exist, and they are still relevant and active today. This is a logo, ICA, stands for Ingenieros Civiles Asociados. This is where my father worked for all of my childhood. This is a very large engineering and infrastructure company. They do all sorts of things. I remember going to see a big dam in the state of Chiapas called Chicoacén. So I was close to not only architecture and design, but also engineering. Again, the design has a very wide definition. And there's also simplicity in good engineering and good infrastructure and good transportation. This is another logo by Lance Wyman. I became obsessed with Lance Wyman. The todo means everything. So this store, they sold a little bit of everything. They took the logo, the graphic image, and made it a sculpture. And this is what it looked like in the 70s. The evolution of the soccer ball. This is Spain 1982. Still simple. This to me is a classic. This is one of my favorites. I was, as you can tell, a big soccer fan. Then my father decided to move to London, like out of the blue. He took us out of our context in Mexico City, and we spent 2 years in London. I was 10, 11 years old. And I did this for you, James, the underground. These logos that are in the life of, and if you've been to London, you see the simplicity of these logos carry a really good message. The simplicity of an airplane that changed the history of flight. Just being in Europe and being connected to all these different countries, all these different visions, all these different definitions of what life is or what simplicity is. Then we get a little bit carried away. To me, this is not we revisit the past, and sometimes it begins to get less simple. 86, so this is help me out, 16, 18 years after the Olympics, and we're still using, a reference to that old graphic that we grew up with. Now it worked, we loved it, it made sense, but anyway. Music, this is Santa Mesa, also in the university. I spent my entire childhood going to this concert hall. The design of this concert hall is one of the most beautiful that you'll ever see. Go to Mexico City, go. The simplicity of Centro Escultórico, also in the university. Any similarity, you'll never know. This is Foster's Apple campus in Cupertino. So here is again, simplicity. Simplicity in the logos that we all see today. This is how that logo began. So now the ticker is working. Okay, here it is. Yeah, the remote control, simplicity. My first car was a W. I don't know if it was from the trauma from that. Nike. I was in a generation that grew up with Nike. I still use them today, like literally. I did that on purpose. I chose them this morning. Then I went to architecture school to learn about design from a different perspective. And the reason I did that was my father's a civil engineer. I was more into the creative aspects of things, so I found this middle ground where I could kind of still be part of his world, have a foot in his world and a foot in mine. And that's how I arrived at architecture. And I found through architecture that art and abstraction and simplicity, this is a work by Matías Geritz, can be translated into architecture. These are the Torres de Satélite in Mexico City. This is how they looked in the 70s and the 80s. They are still there. And people drive by them and sometimes don't notice. Another message I think I have with simplicity is that we pay attention and we notice. Luis Barragan, architecture, made me understand how simple spaces like this that are really complex at the same time. When you go into this space, this is Casa Pilar de la Barrera in Mexico City, you feel you're inside of a painting. It's magical, it's magical. And so design and simplicity can achieve magic. Then I went to SciArc in Los Angeles. This is the longest biographical thing you'll ever see. These are the founders of SciArc, a bunch of crazy individuals, including Michael Rotundi there with the glasses, kind of a John Lennon look-alike. Michael Rotundi is one of the smartest, most generous people I've known, and I reconnected recently with him, and we're in touch. To have these mentors in your life that teach simplicity, amongst other things, to you is very important. Charles and Ray Eames, if you haven't seen The Powers of 10, go online today and look at it. What they did in film many decades ago that speaks about the scale of things and our life on this planet is extraordinary. They did something, talk about simplicity. They did a whole film about soapy water on a parking lot, and it's the most poetic film, or one of the most poetic films you will ever see. It's just water over pavement. It's called Blacktop. I also learned about the work of Gerhard Richter and how he organizes information in a very simple way. Actually, my thesis at SciArc was based on his work. Richard Serra and the simplicity of these lines of curved steel, these are his clocked ellipses. He worked with Frank Gehry, who's one of the founders of SciArc, where I went to school, and I had the opportunity to visit the Guggenheim in Bilbao. That's not, I wouldn't call that simplicity, but again, navigating through complexity to reach simplicity. Robert Irwin, San Diego artist, still alive today, and I'll tell a brief story. I saw this piece at LACMA, and it ended up disappearing. And I met Robert Irwin weeks or months later, and I told him about this experience, and he laughed and told me that that's what it was supposed to do, which is the same thing that happens if you pay attention and you're open enough for it to happen here in La Jolla. If you've been to this space at the museum in La Jolla, if you stay there, for me in LACMA, it had to do, I was a little bit hungover that day, so I don't know if it was that. But if you lose focus, the window disappears and you find yourself in the ocean, the glass disappears. James Turrell, magic with light and space, simplicity. James Turrell created these lightscapes. This is not a floating cube, these are light projections on a corner wall in a gallery. James Turrell acquired and developed the Rodent Crater, which is an amazing piece of art, the land, again, our connection to the land. I had the opportunity to meet James Turrell, to fly to Rodent Crater. I've had a very privileged life, I have to say. I've been very, very, very lucky to meet some of these idols. Teddy Cruz, at SIRC I met Teddy Cruz, a San Diego architect. He introduced me not only to the way he thinks and works, this is Casa Familiar in San Isidro, to the border, to Marcos Ramirez Herre. The ocean doesn't care if we draw a line in the middle that we pretend divides us. We are one. We are one. This border that goes into the water, this unintentional piece of land part, right? Then I went back to Mexico City. I'm not going to bore you with that. I lived in Ensenada, Valle de Guadalupe, Jorge Gracia. Mariana and I lived in New York. We got married while we were there. Cristo and Jean-Claude, the gates at Central Park. Then this moment, August 26th of 2005, inside 05, this guy literally flew over the border. Magical moment, everything stopped. It was like slow motion. So this artist erased the border for a second. And so did this other piece that was at the border for a few years that I never saw live, but erasing the border. That's what we're trying to do at World Design Camp. These are other interventions on the border. The border has a lot of meaning. March 2020, this is when it all changed for all of us. Doesn't matter who you are, where you live, how old you are, it changed the game. For me, this was the key moment in my own journey to rethink, to move back to San Diego after more than a decade, and to arrive with this news that San Diego and Tijuana had been designated World Design Capital. This is where it's been before. First time a US city is designated, first time a cross-border region is designated. I wanted to rethink, reimagine, and reinvent. This is me a year and a half ago at my last day at my previous job. We went to Valencia with the mayor of Tijuana and council member Campillo from San Diego. We saw what they did in Tijuana with World Design Capital. World Design Capital by itself is not important, but we can do important things with it, which is what we have been doing for the past year. This is a workshop that we did. This is the signing ceremony we did in May. And these are some examples of architecture and of simplicity. This is Pedro Ramirez Vasquez, who actually worked with Lance Wyman in 1968. Secult in Tijuana, of course, the South Institute. But I can't think of buildings, except for Barragan's, that touch on simplicity like this one. Actually, Luis Barragan was involved in that courtyard, so there's also a connection there. Everything is connected. This is we actually showed up at CBP and told them we want to cut a hole in the wall and do an event there. They looked at each other and said, but anyway. Let's go back to this image, this planet that we live in. And if we go inside and look at these artificial lands or lines of separation that we drew on the land, the peninsula that was formed millions of years ago, and where we are today. So someday, or one day rather, some people drew a line. Drawing a line is a powerful act. It's a simple act, but it has consequences. If you Google images of what's happening in that border wall today, it's heartbreaking. So simplicity is really difficult to achieve, but it's worth it. And we find moments of simplicity in our lives, not only in a lifelong journey, but in every single day. A day that begins difficult can have beautiful moments of quiet, of solitude, of reflection, of love. I think simplicity is also love. This idea of navigating complexity to arrive at simplicity is also, I believe, the reality of us having to navigate darkness to get to the light. They are the same thing. They're not even two sides of the same coin. They coexist. Complexity and simplicity exist at the same time. We just have to navigate it, we have to identify it, and we have to live with it. So with this context, we arrive at this moment in time today, San Diego and Tijuana together as one. And this one graphic communicates, this is by Máximo Escobedo, we are not separated. We are one thing. San Diego and Tijuana are one. Thank you.